I didn't go to the Gray Line Transit Depot looking for a fight. I was just trying to survive the end of a 14-hour shift. But when I saw the old man counting nickels with shaking hands, I made the mistake of being decent. I paid for his ticket. It cost me $22. It should have ended there. Instead, he leaned in close and whispered the words that would dismantle my life. "Don't use your card. They track kindness here." The fluorescent lights inside the Gray Line Transit Depot buzzed with a sound that felt less like electricity and more like a headache trying to communicate. It was 7:45 on a Tuesday evening in Briarhaven, and the air smelled of wet wool, floor wax, and the specific metallic exhaustion of people waiting to go somewhere else. I stood near the back of the line for the ticket counter, shifting my weight from one heel to the other. My lower back was a knot of tension, a souvenir from 9 hours spent reviewing vendor contracts at Harborwick Health Partners. I was 33 years old, and I spent my days ensuring that a massive healthcare conglomerate followed the letter of the law, if not always the spirit. It was a job that required a forensic eye for detail and a stomach strong enough to tolerate the endless gray areas of corporate bureaucracy. By the time I clocked out, my brain usually felt like wet sand. All I wanted was a ticket to the suburbs, a seat by the window, and 40 minutes of silence. The line, however, was not moving. A murmur of irritation rippled through the people ahead of me. I leaned out just enough to see the bottleneck. At the counter, an elderly man was fumbling with a small, worn leather coin purse. He was slight, his shoulders curved inward as if he were trying to occupy as little space as possible. He wore a tweed coat that had once been high quality, but was now thinning at the elbows, and a flat cap pulled low over gray hair that needed a trim. He was counting coins onto the scratched formica counter. 1 quarter, 2, a nickel, another quarter. The clerk, a heavy-set man with a goatee and eyes that looked glazed over with indifference, tapped his fingers on the register. The sound was rhythmic and aggressive. Tap, tap, tap. "I am sorry," the old man said. His voice was soft. A dry rustle of paper. "I thought I had another $1 in the lining." The clerk sighed, a long, exaggerated exhale that puffed out his cheeks. "The total is $22.50. Sir, you have $19.40. You are holding up the line." I checked my watch. I was going to miss the 8 o'clock outbound if this continued. The practical part of my brain, the part that managed compliance logs and audit trails, told me to just wait. It was not my problem. Getting involved in public disputes in a place like the Gray Line Depot was rarely a good idea. Briarhaven was a city where minding your own business was a survival trait, not just a social grace. But then I saw the old man's hands. They were trembling, not a violent shake, but a fine, high-frequency vibration of nerves. He looked at the coins as if they had betrayed him, his face flushing with a deep, searing shame that I recognized. It was the look of a man who had never expected to be standing here, counting pennies while strangers sighed behind him. I looked at the clerk. He was not looking at the man's face. He was looking over the man's shoulder, scanning the line, rolling his eyes at a woman in a nursing scrub who checked her phone. The lack of empathy made my stomach turn. It was such a small, mundane cruelty. "Excuse me," I said. I stepped out of the line and walked to the front. The people behind me grumbled, but I ignored them. I reached into my bag and pulled out my debit card. "Put his ticket on this," I said, "and mine too. 1 round trip to West Briarhaven." The old man froze. He looked up at me, and I was struck by the clarity of his eyes. They were a pale, watery blue, intelligent and terrified. "No, miss, you do not have to do that," he said. "I can find it. I just need a moment." "It is fine," I said, keeping my voice brisk and professional, the same tone I used when correcting a department head on a filing error. "It has been a long day. Let us just get everyone home." The clerk looked at me. He did not smile. He did not say thank you for keeping his line moving. He looked at my card, then at my face, then back at the card. It was a strange, lingering look, calculating and cold. "Receipt?" the clerk asked. "Yes," I said. He swiped the card. The machine beeped. He printed 2 tickets and a receipt, sliding them across the counter with a sluggish shove. "Next," the clerk shouted, looking past us before we had even gathered our things. I handed the ticket to the old man. He took it with both hands, treating the slip of paper like it was made of gold leaf. "Thank you," he said. He did not smile. It was not a casual gratitude. It was a heavy, exhausted dignity that hit me harder than a thank you would have. It made me feel embarrassed, suddenly, by how easy it was for me to swipe a card and how catastrophic it was for him to be $3 short. We walked away from the counter, moving toward the waiting area near the boarding gates. The station was loud, filled with the echo of announcements and the shuffle of boots. But the space between us felt quiet. "I am Kennedy," I said, feeling the need to break the tension. "Walter," he said. "Walter Klein." I expected him to walk away, to find a bench and wait for his bus. Instead, he stopped near a concrete pillar, partially obscured from the main view of the ticket counter. He turned to me, and the trembling in his hands seemed to travel up into his jaw. He took a step closer. It was an invasion of personal space that would normally make me recoil. But he did not feel threatening. He felt desperate. "Do not use your card again," he whispered. I blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me? They track kindness here," Walter said. His voice was so low I had to lean in to hear him over the announcement of a delayed arrival from Chicago. "If you helped me, they will notice you." I let out a short, incredulous laugh. It was a reflex, a way to dismiss the absurdity of the statement. "Walter, it is just a bus ticket. I do not think the transit authority cares who pays for who." Walter did not laugh. He looked over my shoulder, back toward the ticket counter. "Look," he said. "Do not turn your head fast. Just look." I hesitated, then casually turned my body as if adjusting my bag. I looked back at the counter. The clerk, the heavy-set one with the goatee, was not serving the next customer. He was standing still, staring in our direction. He held a clipboard in his hand. As I watched, he made a sharp, deliberate checkmark on a page, then flipped the sheet over. A few feet away, a security guard in a dark blue uniform was leaning against the wall. He was not watching the crowd. He was watching me. When our eyes met, he did not look away. He adjusted his belt, a subtle, assertive movement, and stared until I was the one who broke contact. A chill, irrational and sharp, pricked the back of my neck. I turned back to Walter. He was watching my face, gauging my reaction. "I am not homeless. Miss Kennedy," he said, "I want you to know that I had an apartment on Elm Street for 20 years. I had a retirement account. I worked in logistics for a shipping firm. I am not a person who begs. I believe you." I said, and to my surprise, I did. "It was a letter," he said, speaking faster now, as if he had a limited amount of time to get the words out. "I got a letter saying there was a hold on my accounts, for verification. Then the check stopped. Then the eviction notice came. They said it was a clerical error, that they were fixing it. But then the Briarhaven Warmline Initiative showed up." "The Warmline Initiative?" I asked. The name sounded familiar. Something vague and benevolent I had seen on billboards. "They help seniors," he said, the word help twisting in his mouth like a piece of wire. "They said they would manage my assets while the bank sorted out the hold. They said it was for my protection. Now I get an allowance, $20 a day, if I behave." He looked down at his shoes. They were polished, but the leather was cracked. "I tried to use my card today," he said. "It was declined. That means they paused me." "Why would they pause you?" I asked. My compliance brain was already latching onto the terms. Assets, hold, manage. It sounded like a conservatorship scam, but on an industrial scale, because I asked for a statement. Walter said, "I asked to see where the money was." The announcement system crackled overhead, announcing the boarding for the 8 o'clock outbound. That was my bus, but I could not move. The strange guilt I had felt earlier was morphing into something else. A buzzing curiosity, a sense that the edges of this situation were too sharp to be accidental. "Let me get you a coffee," I said. "We have 10 minutes. You look cold." "No," Walter said firmly. "No food. I do not want them to see me taking more from you. But," he hesitated, looking around the station again, "do you have a pen? And can I see that receipt?" "The receipt?" I asked. "Please." I dug into my purse and found a ballpoint pen and the crumpled receipt the clerk had shoved at me. I handed them to him. Walter took them and moved to the pillar, using the concrete surface as a desk. He pressed the receipt against the wall, his hand shaking so badly I thought he might tear the paper. "Write it down," he said, shoving the pen back at me. "Write what down?" "The time," he said, "the booth number, and the name on the clerk's badge. Write it on the back of the receipt." "Why?" "Because it changes," Walter said. His eyes were wide, pleading. "Write it down before it changes." I sighed, deciding to humor him. I looked at the receipt. It was stamped 1947. Booth 4. I looked over at the counter. The clerk was busy now, arguing with a teenager about a backpack. I squinted at the plastic ID badge clipped to his lapel. It read Thomas. But as I looked closer, I noticed something odd. The laminate on the badge caught the light in a strange way. The edges were peeling slightly, and the paper insert looked too white, too crisp, as if it had been printed and cut 5 minutes ago. It did not have the worn gray look of a badge that had been worn every day for months. I wrote it down on the back of the receipt. 1947. Booth 4. Thomas. Walter watched me write, his breathing shallow. "Good," he said. "Keep that. Do not throw it away here." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded, dog-eared transit schedule. He opened it, revealing a phone number scrawled in blue ink in the margins of the Saturday timetable. "If you want to know, call this," he said, "but do not use your real name. Use a burner if you have one." "Walter," I said gently, "I think you might be overwhelmed. Maybe we should call a family member?" He laughed, a dry cracking sound. "They will say, 'I am confused.' That is the word they use. Confused, disoriented, unable to manage affairs. I am not confused. Kennedy, I am documented. There is a difference." He shoved the schedule into my hand. "I have to go," he said, glancing toward the security guard again. The guard had pushed off the wall and was starting to walk slowly in our direction. He was not rushing, just drifting, like a shark that had caught a scent. "Walter." "Wait," I said, but he was already moving. For a man who had been moving with agonizing slowness in the line, he was suddenly fast. He merged into a group of commuters disembarking from a metro bus, using their bodies as a shield. He did not look back. He ducked through the automatic doors leading to the street and vanished into the rainy darkness of the city. I stood there, holding a folded schedule and a receipt with a stranger's name written on the back. The security guard walked past me. He did not stop, but he slowed down just enough to look at the papers in my hand, then at my face. His expression was blank, bored, and entirely menacing. I turned and walked toward a trash can, my hand hovering over the opening to toss the receipt. It was trash. It was the paranoid ramblings of a man who had fallen through the cracks of the economy, but I did not drop it. Instead, I slipped the receipt and the schedule into the inside pocket of my coat. Right next to my heart, the bus ride home was a blur of rain-streaked windows and stoplights. I sat near the back, clutching my bag, the conversation playing on a loop in my head. They track kindness here. It was ridiculous. Briarhaven was a mid-sized city with mid-sized corruption, mostly zoning kickbacks and nepotism in the sanitation department. It was not a spy novel. No one was tracking $20 acts of charity at the bus station. And yet, I could not shake the image of the clerk's badge, the way it looked freshly laminated, the way he had marked the clipboard. When I finally unlocked the door to my apartment, the silence of my living room felt different. Usually, it was a sanctuary. Tonight, it felt hollow. I tossed my keys on the counter and kicked off my heels. But I did not turn on the television. I did not pour a glass of wine. I sat down at my kitchen island and pulled out my laptop. I placed the receipt and the schedule on the granite surface. They looked innocuous, just debris from a commute. I opened a browser window and typed, Briarhaven Warmline Initiative. The search results populated instantly. The first hit was a slick, professionally designed website. The banner image showed a diverse group of smiling seniors gardening in a community plot. Bathed in golden hour sunlight, the text was full of buzzwords: dignity, community, assistance, stability. I clicked on the Our Partners page. My breath hitched in my throat. At the top of the page, in large, bold logos, were the sponsors. Larkspur National Bank. I knew Larkspur. They were one of the largest regional banks in the state. They handled the payroll accounts for Harborwick Health, my employer. And next to them, the Renshaw Family Foundation. The Renshaws were Briarhaven royalty. They owned the baseball stadium, the new hospital wing, and half the commercial real estate downtown. They were the kind of money that did not just buy influence. They bought the air the city breathed. I scrolled down. The website listed various programs: asset protection, nutritional support, transitional housing, and transit accessibility. I clicked on transit accessibility. The text read, "To ensure our community members remain connected, the Warmline Initiative maintains outreach hubs at key transit locations to provide emergency travel assistance and safe transport vouchers." There was a list of locations: Gray Line Transit Depot, Central Hub. I sat back in my chair, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounding very loud. Walter had said the station was where they tracked kindness. The website said it was an outreach hub. Two descriptions of the same thing. One framed as charity, one framed as surveillance. I looked at the receipt again. Thomas, Booth 4. I thought about the $22 I had spent. To me, it was the price of 3 coffees. To Walter, it was a lifeline. But to the system I was looking at on the screen, what was it? A glitch? An unauthorized transaction? I remembered Walter's words. They will say I am confused. I am not. I am documented. I minimized the browser window, but I could not turn off the computer. I felt a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach, the same feeling I got when I found a discrepancy in a ledger that could not be explained by bad math. I was a compliance manager. My entire career was built on the premise that if you looked at the paperwork long enough, the truth would fall out. I looked at the folded schedule with the phone number scrawled inside. I was not going to call it. That would be insane. I was going to go to sleep, go to work tomorrow, and forget about the paranoid old man at the bus station. I stood up to go to the bedroom, but as I walked past the window, I instinctively checked the street below. A dark sedan was parked across the street, engine idling, mist curling around its taillights. It was probably nothing. Probably a neighbor. Probably. I closed the blinds, locked the deadbolt, and realized with a sinking certainty that I was not going to forget anything. I sat in my car in the parking garage of my apartment complex, the engine off, the darkness of the lower level pressing against the windows. The folded transit schedule lay on the passenger seat like an unexploded ordnance. It had been 12 hours since I left the Gray Line depot, and the silence of the night had done nothing to quiet the noise in my head. Walter's handwriting was shaky, the blue ink digging deep into the cheap paper of the schedule. I looked at the number. It was a local area code, but that meant nothing in the age of digital routing. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the call button. My compliance training, the instinct that had kept me employed and sane for a decade, screamed at me to leave it alone. You do not call numbers written by paranoid strangers in bus stations. You do not chase ghosts. But I could not forget the way the security guard had looked at me, like he was memorizing my face for a file. I keyed in the sequence to block my caller ID. It was a small, flimsy shield, but it was the only one I had. I dialed the number. It rang once, twice. The line was clean. No static. No background noise of a call center or a household. Briarhaven Assistance and Outreach, a voice said. It was a woman's voice, smooth, melodic, and terrifyingly calm. It sounded less like a receptionist and more like a recording designed to lower a heart rate. Hello? I said, keeping my voice flat. I am calling regarding an individual named Walter Klein. I met him at the Gray Line depot last night. There was a pause, not a hesitation, but a dead air that felt heavy. I was told he might need help, I continued, pushing against the silence. He mentioned he was being tracked. The smooth voice did not change pitch. I am sorry. Caller, we have no record of that name. Are you a family member? No. I said, I am just a citizen. I helped him with a ticket. He seemed afraid of your organization. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was the sharp, attentive silence of someone who had stopped typing and started listening very closely. The connection severed. No goodbye, no click, just the sudden, hollow return of the dial tone. I lowered the phone, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. They had not asked for details. They had not asked for the spelling of his name. They had simply cut the line the moment I connected the man to the place. I slept fitfully, dreaming of receipts that turned into snakes and wrapped around my wrists. The next morning, the sky over Briarhaven was a bruised purple, threatening rain that never quite fell. I drove to Harborwick Health Partners on autopilot, the caffeine from my travel mug doing little to cut through the fog in my brain. Harborwick was a fortress of glass and steel, a monument to the profitability of modern medicine. I parked in my assigned spot on the 4th level and took the elevator down to the lobby. The atrium was bustling with the morning rush, administrators in sharp suits, doctors in white coats, the low hum of 1,000 agendas intersecting. I walked to the security turnstiles, fishing my badge from my bag. I tapped it against the reader. Usually, the light flashed green instantly, accompanied by a cheerful chirp. Today, the light turned a solid, unblinking amber. The screen on the turnstile read, "Processing." I frowned, tapping it again, "Processing." People behind me began to shift impatiently. I stepped out of the line, feeling a flush of irritation. Magnetic strips demagnetized, chips failed. It happened. I walked over to the security desk. The guard, a man named Perez, who I had nodded to every morning for 3 years, looked up. Badge trouble. "Ms. Stewart?" he asked. "I think the chip is fried." I said, "It is giving me the amber light." Perez frowned and typed something into his console. He squinted at the screen. "That is weird," he said. "It is not a chip error. It is flagging for a manual review." "Manual review?" I asked. "Why?" He shrugged, looking genuinely puzzled. "Usually that only happens if HR puts a hold on it, or if you try to access a restricted zone after hours. But it says here, look, it just cleared. You are good." He nodded at the turnstile. The light was now green. Must be a system glitch. Perez said, "Have a good one." I walked through, but the air in the lobby suddenly felt thinner. Manual review. In the language of corporate security, that did not mean a glitch. It meant a human being had looked at my credentials and made a decision. I took the elevator to the 19th floor. My office was a corner cubicle with a view of the adjacent parking structure, prime real estate in the compliance department. I logged into my computer, expecting the usual deluge of emails about vendor certifications and audit timelines. "Kennedy, got a second?" I spun my chair around. My manager, David Sowerby, was leaning against the entrance of my cubicle. David was a good boss, hands-off, practical, and generally more interested in his golf handicap than micromanagement. He held a coffee cup in one hand and looked deceptively relaxed. "Sure, David," I said. "What is up?" He took a sip of coffee, his eyes scanning my desk before meeting mine. "Just doing the quarterly expense approvals. Saw you put in for the conference in Chicago next month." "Yes," I said. "The regulatory update seminar. Right. He paused, looking at the ceiling as if searching for a word. "Hey, total non sequitur. You take the bus yesterday?" My stomach dropped. I kept my face frozen in a pleasant, inquisitive expression. "The bus?" I asked. "No. I drove. Why?" "Oh, weird," David said, chuckling. I could have sworn I saw a log from the transit authority flagged in our commuter benefits portal. Must be a crosswire with someone else named Stewart. You know how their systems are. Ancient. He laughed again, but his eyes did not participate. They remained fixed on me, searching for a flinch. I did not flinch. I forced a smile. Must be. I said, I haven't been on a bus since college. Crazy, David said. Anyway, keep up the good work on the vendor files. We need that scrubbed by Friday. He pushed off the wall and walked away. I turned back to my monitor, my hands trembling. I did not use a commuter benefits card. I used my personal debit card. Harborwick Health Partners had no access to my personal banking records. There was no commuter benefits portal overlap unless I had enrolled in it, which I had not. David knew I was at the Gray Line depot, and he had just let me know that he knew, at noon. I met Mara Ellison at a salad place 3 blocks from the office. Mara was my anchor. We had met in grad school, bonding over a shared hatred of statistics and a love of cheap wine. She worked in HR for a logistics firm, which meant she knew where all the bodies were buried in corporate America. I told her everything: the old man, the ticket, the whisper, the call, the badge error, David's question. Mara stopped eating her kale Caesar. She put her fork down slowly. Kennedy, she said, her voice low. You need to stop. Stop what? I asked. Being paranoid? Stop digging, she said. I looked at her. Mara was usually the first person to jump into a conspiracy theory. She loved true crime podcasts and office gossip. But she looked pale. It is just a weird coincidence, I said, trying to convince myself. It is not. Mara said, listen to me. My brother, Evan. You know he works security for Larkspur National, right? Yeah, I said. He is in their fraud department. He was over for dinner on Sunday. Mara said, he was talking about how the bank is tightening up. They have this new internal unit that tracks reputational risk. He said they are flagging accounts that interact with certain high-risk nonprofits, not because of fraud, Kennedy, because of optics. So? I asked. So, if that old man is on a list, and you used your card, you are linked to the list. And if Harborwick banks with Larkspur, which they do, the data shares. It is automatic. It is an algorithm, not a person. But why would David ask me? I pressed. Why the manual review on my badge? Because once the algorithm flags you, a person does get involved, Mara whispered. Evan told me they have people whose whole job is to gently nudge problem accounts back into line, or cut them off. Kennedy, if you are messing with something Larkspur is protecting, you are not fighting a bank. You are fighting the city's wallet. I felt a chill slide down my spine. I paid $22. Mara, I did not rob a vault. It does not matter, she said, leaning across the table. In their eyes, you stepped out of the flow. You engaged with a liability. Just drop it, please, for your own sake. I looked at my best friend. I saw genuine fear in her eyes, but underneath the fear, I saw something else, a resignation, the acceptance that the machine was too big to fight, so the only smart move was to hide. I finished my salad in silence. I did not go back to the office after lunch. I told David I had a migraine, which was rapidly becoming the truth, and drove to the Gray Line depot. The station in the daylight was less menacing, but infinitely sadder. The sunlight revealed the grime on the floors, the cracks in the plaster, the sheer hopelessness of the people waiting on the benches. I walked to the ticket counter. The heavy-set clerk with the goatee was gone. In his place stood a woman with bright red glasses and a name tag that read, Janet. "Can I help you?" she asked, not looking up from her phone. "Hi," I said. "I was here last night. I think I might have left a receipt on the counter. I need it for my expense report. It would have been around 7:45. Booth 4. Janet looked up. Bored. "We do not keep receipts." "Honey, if you did not take it, it is gone." "I know." I said, "But maybe it fell? Or maybe the clerk from last night put it aside?" "His name was Thomas." Janet frowned. "We do not have a Thomas." I paused. "He was here last night. Heavy-set guy. Goatee. Booth 4. She shook her head. "I have worked here 6 years. No Thomas on the night shift. It was probably erratic staffing from the temp agency. They cycle through. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What about the digital record? Can you reprint it? I have the transaction on my bank statement. Janet sighed, tapping her screen. We cannot reprint past midnight. That is not true. I said, the Transit Authority policy says transaction history is available for 30 days. It is posted right there on the wall. I pointed to the laminated placard bolted to the plexiglass divider. Customer rights, receipt retention. Janet's eyes narrowed. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Look, lady, the system flushes at midnight. That is what I am told to say. That is what happens. We do not keep paper. We do not keep logs. If you want to file a complaint, go to the website. But stop holding up my line. She looked past me. Next, I walked away, my legs feeling heavy. We don't keep logs, lies. In my world, in the world of compliance and finance, everything was logged. If they were claiming the data was gone, it meant they were hiding it. I sat on a bench near the back, pulling out my phone. I needed to know what the Warm Line Initiative actually did. I navigated to their website again. I bypassed the smiling stock photos and went to the Apply for Assistance page. It was a labyrinth. To apply for a travel voucher or emergency transit stabilization, an applicant had to upload a birth certificate, 3 months of bank statements, a notarized affidavit of need, Social Security history. It was an absurd amount of data for a bus ticket. It was the kind of data harvest you did for a mortgage, not a $20 voucher. I clicked the link for application processing. The browser redirected me away from the Warmline site to a portal with a generic gray background. Powered by Cedar Ridge Administrative Services. I had never heard of Cedar Ridge. I opened a new tab and logged into the state's Secretary of State business search. It was public information, accessible to anyone who knew where to look. I typed Cedar Ridge Administrative Services. The results loaded. Status, active, registered agent, Legal Corp Solutions, principal address, 4040 Industrial Way, Suite B, Briarhaven. I switched to a map app and typed in the address. 4040 Industrial Way was a strip mall on the edge of town. I zoomed in. Suite B was not an office. It was a mailbox rental store next to a vape shop and a discount mattress warehouse. I felt that cold, familiar sensation I got when an audit revealed a gap in the numbers. It was the feeling of seeing a structure that looked solid from the outside, but was made of cardboard on the inside. Cedar Ridge was a shell. It existed only to process paperwork. So, Warmline, a nonprofit backed by the biggest bank in the city, was funneling sensitive personal data of vulnerable seniors through a shell company in a strip mall. Why? My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked at the screen. Restricted number. I stared at it. The station noise faded into a dull roar. I answered, "Hello?" They moved me from the list. It was Walter. His voice was breathless, panicked. "Walter?" I asked. "Where are you? Do not talk," he hissed. "Just listen. They moved me. My ID does not work at the pantry anymore. They said I am non-compliant. Walter, I can help you." I said, "Just tell me where—" "If you keep looking," he said, his voice dropping to a terrifying deadpan. "Do not go alone." The line went dead. I looked at the timer on the screen. 12 seconds. I stood up, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. He had called me. How did he have my number? I realized then. I had never given him my number. He had given me the schedule with the assistance number in it. But he had called me. Unless he had seen me somewhere else? Or unless he had memorized a number I did not remember giving? No, I had not given it to him. Wait, I replayed the moment at the station. I had handed him the receipt. I had handed him the pen. I had not given him a card. Then how? The realization hit me, slow and sickening. He did not have my number. He had called the number he gave me, the one written in the schedule. I looked at the schedule again, the number written in blue ink. Was it a party line? A drop? No, that made no sense. I sat there, baffled, until the simplest explanation landed. He had found me, or someone had connected us. I needed to report this, not to the police. Walter was terrified of authorities, but to someone who could track the conflict of interest. I opened the Harborwick employee app on my phone. We had an anonymous ethics hotline, a third-party service designed for whistleblowers. It was supposed to be a safe harbor for reporting vendor fraud or conflicts of interest. I typed quickly, my thumbs flying over the keypad. Subject: potential conflict of interest/vendor due diligence. Report: high-level anomaly observed between Harborwick banking partner, Larkspur National, and vendor affiliate, Warmline/Cedar Ridge. Evidence of data harvesting and potential misappropriation of vulnerable client funds. Reputational risk to Harborwick. I hesitated, then hit submit. The screen loaded. Thank you. Your report has been received. Your confirmation number is HW-998-error-null. I frowned. Error-null? I refreshed the page. You have no active reports. I tried again. Same result. The system was accepting the input and then vaporizing it. It gave the appearance of functionality while ensuring nothing was ever actually logged. I put the phone in my pocket. I felt exposed, naked. I drove back to Harborwick. Not because I wanted to work, but because I needed to be somewhere with cameras and witnesses. As I walked toward the elevator bank, Holly Vance stepped into my path. Holly worked in public relations. She was one of those people who was aggressively friendly, always organizing birthday cards and happy hours. We had spoken maybe 5 times in 3 years. "Kennedy," she chirped, linking her arm through mine as if we were old sorority sisters. "Oh my gosh, I love that blazer. Is it vintage?" "Thanks." "Holly," I said, trying to untangle my arm. She leaned in, dropping her voice. The smile did not leave her face, but her eyes went flat. "Hey, quick heads up," she said breezily. "I was in a meeting with the exec team earlier. Your name came up." "My name?" I asked. "Yeah, someone mentioned you are getting a reputation for overcorrecting." "Overcorrecting? You know, digging into weeds that do not need mowing." Holly squeezed my arm. "Just a friendly tip. People get nervous when compliance gets too creative. You do not want to be the girl who cried wolf, right? Especially with the merger rumors floating around." She released my arm and patted my shoulder. "Anyway, we should grab drinks sometime. You look like you need a margarita." She walked away, her heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the marble floor. I stood there, feeling the blood drain from my face. Overcorrecting. It was a warning. It was a polite, corporate way of saying, "We see you. Stop." I went to my desk, packed my laptop, and left. I did not care about the badge log. I did not care about David. I drove home, locking the door behind me. I paced my living room, the pieces of the puzzle swirling in my head, the badge error, the missing clerk, the shell company, the fake hotline, the warning from Holly, and Walter. Don't go alone. I sat on my couch and closed my eyes, forcing myself to go back to the beginning, to the moment at the counter. I visualized the gray line depot, the smell of floor wax, the scratched formica. I saw the clerk, Thomas. I saw the clipboard. I saw the card reader. It was a standard black terminal, but something about it nagged at me. I replayed the motion. I had reached out with my card. I had swiped it. But the reader was not sitting alone. It was positioned directly under a small, plexiglass stand displaying a QR code for Warmline donations. The stand was angled forward, overhanging the swipe slot. When I swiped my card, my hand had passed directly under the QR display. I opened my eyes, my heart racing. It was not just a donation sign. If there was a scanner embedded in the base of that stand, a simple high-speed camera, or an RFID skimmer, it would capture the card data as it passed underneath, not the chip transaction, which was encrypted. The physical image of the card, the name, the number, and because the clerk's badge was positioned right next to it, the camera would catch that too. Or maybe the badge was the trigger? That was why Walter told me to write down the badge name before it changed. Because the badges were not just identification, they were session keys. Each Thomas or Janet was a login code for a data harvesting session. It was a funnel. They were not just charging $22 for a ticket. They were capturing the identity of everyone who paid for someone else. They were building a database of sympathizers, of people with disposable income and a bleeding heart, people like me. And now, thanks to my $22 and my curiosity, I was in the database. I looked at the window. The dark sedan was gone. But the street felt empty in a way that was not peaceful. It felt cleared. I grabbed my laptop. I needed to document this. I needed to write it down on paper. Not on a machine that could be wiped or monitored. I found a fresh notebook in my drawer. I sat at the kitchen island and uncapped a pen. I began to write. I wrote to save Walter. I wrote to understand. But mostly, as the shadows lengthened across my floor, I wrote because I knew that if I did not, the truth would disappear just like the receipt I was never supposed to ask for. I stopped looking for a villain and started looking for a file. Panic is a chemical reaction, quick and messy, but compliance is a discipline. If I was going to survive this, I could not be the paranoid woman whispering in coffee shops. I had to be what I was trained to be, a boring, methodical, invisible auditor of facts. 2 days after the call with Walter, I drove to the industrial outskirts of the city, near the airport flight path. I rented a 5x5 storage locker at Briarhaven Storage Row. I paid in cash, 6 months up front. The manager, a guy with grease under his fingernails and zero interest in customer service, did not ask for ID. I bought a plastic bin and a heavy-duty padlock. This was my clean room. I started printing everything. Every screenshot of the Warmline website, every corporate filing for Cedar Ridge, every publicly available tax return for the Renshaw Family Foundation. I printed the email from the ethics hotline that gave me a null error code. I printed the map of the transit depot. I did not keep anything in my apartment. I did not keep anything in my car. I created a physical shadow of the digital lie, and I locked it behind a steel door that smelled of dust and damp concrete. I needed a backup, though, a human backup. I met Mara Ellison at her place on a rainy Thursday. Mara's apartment was a chaotic sanctuary of half-read books and essential oils. The exact opposite of my sterile, organized life. I laid it out for her, not the emotional version, but the timeline, the facts. "You are insane," Mara said, pouring us both a glass of red wine. She looked at the photocopy of the transit schedule I had placed on her coffee table. "You are absolutely insane." "I am not," I said. "I am careful." "Careful?" Mara laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "Kennedy, my brother works for these people. Larkspur is not just a bank. It is the plumbing of this city. If you clog the pipes, they do not just call a plumber. They replace the pipe. I need you to be my sanity check." I said, "I am not asking you to dig. I am asking you to hold the key." I slid a spare key to the storage locker across the table. "If something happens to me," I said, "or if I get fired for something that does not make sense, or if I just stop calling you, go to the locker, take the box, give it to the press." Mara stared at the key like it was radioactive. "This is melodrama. Kennedy, this is real life, not a movie." "I know," I said, "in real life, people get ruined quietly. They get fired. Their credit gets trashed. They get towed. I just want insurance." Mara hesitated, then covered the key with her hand. She did not say yes, but she did not push it back. "I hate this," she whispered, "but I will keep it." The following week, I received an invitation. It came to my work email, which was the first red flag. I had never used my work email for anything related to the Warmline initiative. The subject line read, "Community Leaders Night at Riversend Civic Hall, an invitation." It was a generic blast, or so it seemed, until I opened it. "Dear Kennedy, considering your role in local healthcare compliance, we believe your perspective would be invaluable." It was targeted. They were watching where I worked. I decided to go. If I hid, I looked guilty. If I showed up, I was just a civic-minded professional interested in charity. Riversend Civic Hall was a cavernous, beautifully restored brick building on the waterfront. The event was polished to a high sheen. There were high-top tables with white linens, waiters circulating with trays of bruschetta, and a string quartet playing innocuous covers of pop songs. The room was full of Briarhaven's Tier 1 crowd. I saw city council members, hospital administrators, and developers. I saw the logos of the sponsors projected on the back wall: Larkspur National Bank, the Renshaw Family Foundation, Harborwick Health Partners. It was a closed loop. The people donating the money, the people managing the money, and the people receiving the credit were all shaking hands in the same room. I grabbed a glass of sparkling water and walked the perimeter. There were displays set up, large glossy posters featuring success stories. Walter, 72, found stability through Warmline's housing initiative. I froze. The photo showed a man who looked nothing like the Walter I had met. This man was smiling, wearing a clean cardigan, holding a set of keys. It was a stock photo. I had seen the same model on an insurance pamphlet a year ago. I looked around the room. I searched for the beneficiaries, the seniors, the people this money was supposedly for. There were none. It was a room full of suits and evening gowns. There was not a single person here who looked like they had ever needed a bus ticket. Kennedy Stewart? The voice was warm, projected with the confidence of someone who is used to being listened to. I turned. Diane Halberd stood before me. She was taller than I expected, wearing a cream-colored suit that cost more than my car. Her hair was a silver blonde helmet of perfection, and her smile was dazzling. "I am Diane Halberd," she said, extending a hand. "Executive Director. I am so glad you could make it." I shook her hand. Her grip was firm, dry, and cool. "It is a lovely event," I said. "Thank you for the invite." She did not ask who I was. She did not ask for my last name. "We have been admiring your work from afar," Diane said, tilting her head slightly. "Harborwick has such a robust compliance framework. We are always looking for that kind of discipline in the nonprofit sector. It is rare." I felt a prickle of unease. I had never introduced myself to anyone at Warmline. "I am just a manager," I said, keeping my voice light. "I mostly handle vendor contracts." "Oh, modesty." Diane laughed. It was a practiced, musical sound. "Detail is everything. Kennedy, you noticed the complexities of our transit program, didn't you?" She was looking right at me. Her eyes were a pale gray, unblinking. She was referring to my call. She was referring to the ticket. I was curious. I said, deciding to play the naive professional, "I noticed some of the documentation requirements for the vouchers seemed high. For a transit pass." Diane nodded sympathetically. "I know. It is bureaucracy. We hate it too. But when you are dealing with federal grants and private trusts, the audit trails have to be impeccable. We have to prove that every dollar goes to the right person." She took a step closer. The air around her smelled of expensive vanilla and ozone. "Actually," Diane said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "we are looking for someone with your specific eye to join our advisory committee. Just a quarterly meeting. We need people who understand the importance of structural integrity." It was an offer, and it was a threat. "Come inside. Join the team. Be one of us. And you will be safe." I smiled. "That is very flattering, Diane, but I'm pretty swamped at Harborwick right now." "Think about it," she said. She touched my arm. A light, lingering pressure. "Compliance is the kind of work that keeps institutions safe, and we want to make sure everyone stays safe." She squeezed my arm. Just for a second. It was not a caress. It was a vice. "Diane," a voice boomed from across the room. She released me instantly, her smile brightening. "Excuse me," she said. "Duty calls. Do enjoy the bruschetta. Kennedy." She walked away, sliding effortlessly into a group of bankers. I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs. Keeps institutions safe. She was not talking about the nonprofit. She was talking about the lie. I needed to leave. The air in the room felt thin. I turned toward the exit, placing my empty glass on a passing tray. As I did, a young man in a volunteer t-shirt, too big for his frame, bumped into me. "Sorry," he mumbled. He was holding a stack of used napkins. He fumbled, dropping one on the table next to my hand. He did not pick it up. He looked at me, his eyes wide and terrified, and then he turned and walked fast toward the kitchen doors. I looked down at the napkin. It was not used. I palmed it, sliding it into my pocket in one fluid motion. I walked to the coat check, retrieved my trench coat, and walked out into the cool night air. I did not look at the napkin until I was in my car. Doors locked, engine running. I unfolded the cocktail napkin. On the back, written in shaky ballpoint pen, was an address, 4040 Industrial Way, Suite B, and underneath, 2 words, not seniors. Accounts. I knew the address. It was the address for Cedar Ridge Administrative Services, the mailbox store, but the note, not seniors, accounts. I drove. I did not go home. I drove straight to Industrial Way. It was 9 o'clock at night. The strip mall was mostly dark. The vape shop had a neon sign buzzing in the window, but the rest of the block was asleep. I parked 3 spots down from Suite B. I walked up to the glass door. It was dark inside. I pressed my face against the glass, cupping my hands to block the glare of the streetlights. It was not a mailbox store anymore. The space was gutted. The walls were stripped to the studs. There were no counters, no rows of brass mailboxes, just a pile of drywall dust and a few stray wires hanging from the ceiling. I stepped back and looked at the door. There was a piece of printer paper taped to the inside of the glass. Cedar Ridge Administrative Services. By appointment only. I tried the handle. Locked. A man walked out of the vape shop next door, exhaling a cloud of strawberry-scented vapor. He looked at me suspiciously. "You looking for the mail place?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I have a package to pick up. Moved out months ago." The man said. "Lease was up, but the sign is still there," I said, pointing to the paper. "Yeah, the landlord is lazy." He shrugged. "Some guys come by once a week to pick up the mail from the slot, but there is no office, just a drop." "Who picks up the mail?" I asked. The man looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "You a cop?" "No," I said, "just missing a package. Usually a courier." He said, "Armored truck sometimes." Which is weird, right? For a mailbox place. Armored truck. You do not send mail in an armored truck. You send cash, or negotiable instruments. I thanked him and walked back to my car. Not seniors, accounts. The Warm Line initiative was not helping seniors. It was creating accounts in their names. That was why they needed the birth certificates. That was why they needed the Social Security history. They were opening bank accounts, hundreds of them, using the identities of the elderly poor, people who had no assets, no family watching, and who were accustomed to being invisible. And then they were moving money through those accounts. It was money laundering. But it was brilliant. It was not drug money or cartel cash. It was charity. It was grants. It was unclaimed property. They were funneling millions of dollars through these ghost accounts, washing it clean, and then moving it. Where? To the partners? To the vendors? I drove home, my mind racing. I was not just looking at fraud. I was looking at a factory that turned human beings into financial funnels. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex at 10:30. My spot, number 4B, was empty. I stopped the car in the middle of the lane. I stared at the empty asphalt. I knew I had parked there. I always parked there. I got out, my hands shaking. I walked to the spot. There was no glass on the ground, no sign of a break-in. I looked at the signpost. Towing enforced by Vulture Recovery Services. I called the number on the sign. "Yeah, we have a Honda Civic. Plate ending in 898, the dispatcher drawled. "Picked up an hour ago." "Why?" I demanded. "That is my assigned spot. I pay for it. Expired registration," the man said. That is a lie, I said. My tags are good until November. I just renewed them. Driver's log says expired. He said, you can come get it in the morning. $300 cash, plus storage fees. I hung up. It was not about the $300. It was a message. We can touch you. We can take your things. We can inconvenience you. I called an Uber. I went to the impound lot immediately. I was not going to leave my car in their hands overnight. The lot was a fenced-in mud pit on the south side. The guy in the booth looked like he had been constructed out of beef jerky and resentment. I paid the cash. I did not argue. I walked to my car. It was unlocked. I opened the driver's door. The glove compartment was open. Its contents, my manual, my insurance card, a few napkins, a tire gauge, were scattered on the passenger seat. My stomach dropped. I checked the center console. My spare sunglasses were there. My emergency $20 bill was there. Nothing of value was taken. But my notebook, the one I used for work, which I had foolishly left in the passenger door pocket, was sitting on the dashboard. It was bent. The spine was cracked, as if someone had opened it and flattened it to take photos of the pages. It was just meeting notes, schedules, nothing about Walter, nothing about Warmline, but they did not know that until they checked. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. I felt violated. It was a specific, intimate kind of violation. Someone had been in my space, rifling through my life, looking for dirt. I drove home, checking my rearview mirror every 10 seconds. The next morning, Harborwick Health Partners felt different. The air conditioning seemed colder. The smiles in the hallway seemed sharper. I was summoned to David Sowerby's office at 9 a.m. sharp. David did not offer me coffee. He was standing by the window, looking out at the parking garage. "Kennedy, take a seat," he said. I sat. I folded my hands in my lap to hide the fact that they were trembling. "We have a new directive coming down from the CFO," David said, turning to face me. "We are doing a comprehensive due diligence audit on our strategic financing partners." "Okay," I said. "That is standard." "It is," David said. "But this one is sensitive. We are looking at consolidating our vendor payments through a new portal. It is a partnership with Larkspur National." "Larkspur. I need a project lead," David said. "Someone who is detail-oriented, someone who can be trusted to handle delicate information." He looked at me. His eyes were blank. "I am assigning you to the Larkspur integration." "Kennedy." I felt the blood drain from my face. "David," I said, keeping my voice steady, "is that a good idea?" "I have a full plate with the vendor certification renewal. We are reallocating your other files." David said, "This is priority 1. You will be working directly with the Larkspur compliance team. You will have full access to their vendor interface protocols." He smiled. It was a tight, grim smile. "Diane Halberd spoke very highly of you," he said. The room spun slightly. She had done it. She had pulled the strings. They were not firing me. They were bringing me inside. They were putting me on the payroll of the very scheme I was investigating. If I refused, I would look suspicious. If I accepted, I would be bound by non-disclosure agreements and conflict of interest policies that would make it illegal for me to speak to anyone about what I found. It was a trap, a golden, corporate trap. I would be happy to help. "David," I said. "Good," he said. "Kickoff meeting is Monday." I left the office at 5. I felt like I was wearing a wire. Even though I was just wearing a blazer, I needed to see Walter. I had not heard from him since the 12-second phone call, but I knew where the food pantry distribution was on Fridays. It was at St. Jude's, a crumbling stone church in the old district. I parked a block away and walked. The line for the pantry wrapped around the block. It was a sea of gray coats and weary faces. I waited in the shadows of the rectory, watching. I saw him. Walter was walking out of the basement doors, carrying a plastic bag of canned goods. He looked thinner. His coat hung loosely on his frame, but his eyes, as he scanned the parking lot, were sharp, alert. He saw me. He did not wave. He did not smile. He walked toward the edge of the lot, near the dumpsters, where the shadows were deepest. I followed, keeping my distance until we were shielded from the street. Walter, I whispered. He turned. Up close. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes, and a stubble of white beard on his chin. You should not be here, he said. They towed my car. I said, they went through my things. He nodded. Of course they did. They are checking to see what you have. Walter, I said, I went to the address. Cedar Ridge. It is gone. It was never there. Walter said, it is a ghost. He reached into his coat. He pulled out a folded, wrinkled piece of paper. Here, he said. What is this? It came in the mail at my old address. Walter said, my neighbor saved it for me. He knows I am away. I unfolded the paper. It was a document from the State Treasury Department. Notice of unclaimed property resolution. It listed Walter Klein as the claimant. It listed an amount, $18,400, and at the bottom, there was a stamp, claim resolved/paid. There was a signature line. It was signed Walter Klein, but it was not Walter's signature. It was a smooth, looping script that looked nothing like the shaky handwriting on the transit schedule. They took it, Walter said. My retirement account, he said. The bank put a hold on it. Then they sent it to the state as abandoned property because of inactivity. Even though I was calling them every week, he spat on the ground. Then Warmline filed a claim for it. As my designated representative, they forged my name. They took the money. And then they gave me a $20 debit card and told me I should be grateful. I stared at the document. This was it. This was the engine. They froze the assets of vulnerable seniors. They let the money drift into the state's unclaimed property fund. A massive, bureaucratic black hole. Then, using the assistance documentation the seniors signed to get a bus ticket or a meal, they claimed the money. They were stealing life savings, one abandoned account at a time, and they were doing it under the banner of a charity that won awards from the city council. It is not fraud, I whispered. No, Walter said. It is theft with paperwork. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a spark of something dangerous in his eyes. It was not just fear, it was rage. They think I am senile, Walter said. They think I am just a confused old man who lost his money. But I have the letter. He pointed a shaking finger at the document in my hand. You keep that. Kennedy. I have nowhere to put it where it is safe. I folded the paper and put it in my inside pocket. I am going to stop them. Walter, I said. He looked at me, and his expression softened into a terrible pity. You can't stop them, he said. They own the bank. They own the building we are standing behind. Then I will break them. I said. Walter shook his head. Just survive. Kennedy, that is the only victory they allow. He turned and walked away into the darkness, clutching his bag of cans. I stood there, feeling the weight of the forged document against my ribs. I was done with compliance. I was done with due diligence. I was going to burn it down. But first, I had to join them. I walked back to my car, the plan forming in my mind like a structure of cold, hard steel. Monday morning, I would walk into the Larkspur integration meeting. I would smile, I would shake hands, and I would become the best, most thorough auditor they had ever seen. I would document every single vein of the rot, from the inside out. They wanted me on the team? Fine, I was going to be the teammate from hell. The document Walter had given me, the Notice of Unclaimed Property Resolution, became the centerpiece of my wall in the storage locker. It was a single sheet of paper, but it was heavy with implication. I sat on the cold concrete floor of the locker, surrounded by the hum of the facility's ventilation system, and studied the notary stamp at the bottom of the page. It was a standard ink stamp, the kind you could order from any office supply store for $20. Notary Public, Elias V. Thorne, Commission ID 899-42-L. I pulled up the state's public notary database on my laptop, tethered to my phone's hotspot. I typed in the name, Elias V. Thorne. The database returned a match. Active commission, registered address, 4040 Industrial Way, Suite B, the same address as the empty Cedar Ridge office. I expanded the search. I used my subscription to a public records aggregator, a tool I usually use to vet vendors for tax liens, and ran a query for any property filings notarized by that ID number in the last 18 months. The screen refreshed, and the scroll bar shrank to a tiny sliver. There were hundreds of them. Claimant: Arthur Miller. Status: resolved. Amount: $12,000. Claimant: Beatrice O'Connell. Status: resolved. Amount: $7,500. Claimant: David P. Lewis. Status: resolved. Amount: $31,000. Page after page of seniors who had supposedly reclaimed their forgotten assets, and every single one of them was notarized by Elias V. Thorne at the empty suite on Industrial Way. I looked at the signatures on the digital copies. They were all remarkably similar, a smooth, practiced loop on the L's and T's. It was not just that Elias Thorne was notarizing these forms. It looked like Elias Thorne, or whoever held the stamp, was signing for the claimants too. This was not a few bad apples. This was a harvest. I printed the list. It was 40 pages long. I taped it to the wall next to Walter's notice. It looked like a casualty list. My phone buzzed. It was Mara. Evan needs to talk to you. Not at the house. Meet him at the Roost in 20 minutes. The Roost was a dive bar near the university, dark enough at noon to hide in and loud enough to drown out conversation. I arrived first. Evan Ellison walked in 5 minutes later. He looked like Mara, but with the softness sanded off. He wore a Larkspur National Bank polo shirt and the tired expression of a man who knew too much about things he could not control. He slid into the booth opposite me without ordering a drink. "You need to stop going to the bus station." "Kennedy," he said. "Hello to you too." "Evan," I said. "I am serious," he said, keeping his voice low. "I saw the briefing this morning. Security at the Gray Line Depot has been issued a new directive regarding disruptive solicitors." "Disruptive solicitors?" I asked. "I bought a ticket." "Evan, once. They have your photo," he said. "Not a clear one, but a screen grab from the CCTV. It is pasted in the guard booth. The caption says you are approaching vulnerable passengers and harassing them for personal information." My mouth fell open. They are saying I am the one harassing them? "It is the narrative. Kennedy." Evan leaned in. His hands clasped tight on the sticky table. "They are framing it as a safety issue. If you show up there again, they will not just ask you to leave. They will detain you for trespassing and harassment. And they will call the police." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because Mara would kill me if you got arrested," he said. "And because—" He hesitated, looking at the door. "Because I see the flags. Kennedy, I work in fraud. I see the accounts that get flagged for special handling. The warm line accounts are untouchable. We are told to route any inquiries directly to the chaotic void of the legal department. That is not normal banking." He stood up. "Don't go back to the station. And don't underestimate how much they want to protect this." He walked out before I could ask him anything else. I sat there, staring at the ring of water his glass had left on the table. Disruptive solicitor. It was brilliant, in a sick way. They were projecting their own predatory behavior onto me. If I tried to help Walter, they would claim I was exploiting him. They were preempting my testimony by destroying my credibility before I even opened my mouth. I needed to see Walter, but I could not go to the station, and the church pantry was only on Fridays. I waited until Sunday morning. I knew from our brief conversation that he sometimes sat in the park near the library to read the newspapers people left on the benches. I found him there, sitting under an oak tree, wearing the same tweed coat. He was reading the sports section of a discarded Sunday Ledger. I sat on the other end of the bench, leaving 3 feet of space between us. "Walter," I said softly. He did not jump. He turned the page. "You are being watched," he said without looking at me. "So are you." I said, "I know." He said, "A car followed the bus yesterday, a gray sedan." "Walter, we need to have rules." I said, "If we are going to do this, we have to be smarter than them." He folded the paper and looked at me. His eyes were clear, but the skin around them was tight with stress. "What kind of rules?" "Number 1. I said, No money. I cannot give you cash. I cannot buy you anything, not a coffee, not a ticket. If they see money change hands, they will say I am paying you to lie, or that I am scamming you. He nodded slowly. I understand. Number 2. I said, we never meet at night, only in public, only in daylight. If anyone asks, we are distant relatives catching up. I have no relatives. Walter said, we are cousins. I said, second cousins. My mother was a Klein. He managed a faint, dry smile. She was a Stewart. She was a Klein before that. I said, Number 3. You do not sign anything. Nothing. If Warmline approaches you, if the bank approaches you, if a lawyer approaches you, you sign nothing until I see it. They have been calling. Walter said, not the bank, a man. He says he wants to resolve the misunderstanding about my account. Do not talk to him. I said, I won't. Walter said, but Kennedy? I am tired. They cut my voucher balance yesterday. I have $4 left. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the $20 bill I always kept there. I wanted to give it to him. I wanted to fix the immediate problem, but I remembered Evan's warning, disruptive solicitor, harassing vulnerable passengers. If I gave him the money, I validated their lie. I took my hand out of my pocket, empty. I know, Walter, I said, and the words tasted like ash. I am so sorry, but if I give you money, they win. He looked at my empty hand, then up at my face. He saw the pain in my eyes, and he nodded. You are a hard woman. Kennedy Stewart, he said gently. That is good. We need hard people. I needed a megaphone. I had the evidence, or at least the outline of it, but I was just one compliance manager against a conglomerate. I looked up Sasha Morrow. She was a reporter for the Briarhaven Ledger, a small daily paper that had seen better days. I knew her byline. She wrote the stories that usually got buried on page 6, city council zoning disputes, school board budget errors, the boring, granular machinery of the city. I emailed her from a Proton account I set up in the storage locker. Subject, unclaimed property /Warmline/Cedar Ridge. Body, I have the notary. ID, I have the list of resolving agents. I know where the money is going. Meet me. She replied in 10 minutes. The Beanery on 4th. Come alone. Sasha Morrow was younger than I expected. Maybe 28. With messy dark hair and eyes that looked perpetually skeptical. She had a laptop open and 3 empty coffee cups on the table. You are the compliance girl, she said as I sat down. Kennedy Stewart, Harborwick. You Googled me. I said, I vet my sources. She said, so, you think you found a hole in the Warmline initiative? I didn't think. I said, I slid a folder across the table. It contained a copy of Walter's notice and the list of filings notarized by Elias V. Thorne. Sasha opened the folder. She scanned the pages, her expression remaining flat. Elias Thorne, she muttered. Sounds like a character from a Gothic novel. He is a rubber stamp. I said, and he operates out of an empty room. Sasha closed the folder. She leaned back, crossing her arms. This is good, she said, but it is circumstantial. Circumstantial? I asked, incredulous. There are 40 resolved claims here. Sasha, millions of dollars, and the claimants are all people receiving aid from Warmline. And can you prove that Warmline took the money? Sasha asked. Can you prove the seniors didn't sign those releases voluntarily? Walter didn't sign it. I said, one man. Sasha said, a man with a history of financial instability. A man they will paint as confused. Look, Kennedy, I want to write this. I hate the Renshaws. They bought this city 10 years ago and turned it into a company town. But if I run this story with just this, they will sue the paper out of existence. They have sued you before? I asked. Twice, Sasha said. The Renshaw Family Foundation has a legal team that costs more than our entire editorial budget. They don't have to win in court. They just have to bleed us dry during discovery. My editor, Frank, is terrified of them. So what do you need? I asked. I need the money trail. Sasha said. I need to know how they are moving the cash. Not just that it is gone, but where it went. And I need a source inside the processing center. I don't have a source inside. I said, Cedar Ridge is empty. Then find someone who used to be there. Sasha said, or someone who saw the data moving. I found Glenn Price in the phone book. It was an archaic way to find someone. But Glenn was an archaic man. He had been a data entry clerk for the State Treasury Department for 30 years before retiring 6 months ago. I found his name on an old org chart I dug up in the state archives. He lived in a small bungalow in West Briarhaven, the kind with a perfectly manicured lawn and a porch swing. I knocked on his door on a Tuesday evening. Glenn was a man of few words, suspenders, and meticulous habits. When I told him I was looking into the Cedar Ridge anomaly, he didn't slam the door. He invited me in for tea. I always knew someone would come asking. Glenn said, pouring hot water into china cups. You noticed it? I asked. Hard not to. He said, for 20 years. The unclaimed property division moved like molasses. We cleared maybe 50 claims a week. Then, about 2 years ago, the volume spiked. Suddenly we were clearing 500 a week, and nobody asked why. Management was thrilled. Glenn said, they got to report that they were reuniting citizens with their assets at record speeds. They got bonuses. But the paperwork, I said, did you see the applications? Glenn took a sip of tea. I saw them. They were all batched. They came in stacks of 50, all perfectly filled out. All notarized by the same 3 or 4 people. Thorne was one of them. Did you say anything? I mentioned it to my supervisor. Glenn said, he told me that we had a new third-party facilitator helping with the backlog. He told me to stop looking at the signatures and just process the checks. Where did the checks go? Glenn? I asked. That is the thing, he said, leaning forward. They weren't checks. It was all electronic funds transfer, direct deposit, to the claimant's accounts, to a routing number. Glenn said, I memorized the prefix because it showed up so often. 064009. I froze. I knew that prefix. That is Larkspur National. I said, Glenn nodded, but it wasn't checking accounts. It was a bulk settlement account, a holding tank. The money went in, and then it vanished. He looked at me, his eyes sad behind thick glasses. I retired early. Glenn said, because I didn't want my name on those batches anymore. I went back to work the next day with a burning sensation in my chest. The routing number, the bulk settlement account. Larkspur was not just the bank for the nonprofit. Larkspur was the destination. The money was being seized from the state, funneled through the fake claims, and deposited directly back into a holding tank controlled by the bank. They were stealing from the poor to pad their own liquidity. Kennedy. I looked up. David Sowerby was standing at my desk again. He was not smiling. We need to do a performance check-in, he said. Now? Now. We went to his office. He closed the door. He sat behind his desk and folded his hands. Kennedy, I am concerned, he said. About the vendor project? I asked. I am on schedule. About you, David said. You seem distracted, erratic. I have had reports from the Larkspur team that you are asking questions that are outside the scope of the integration. I am doing due diligence. David, I said, I am verifying the entity structures. You are auditing our partners. David corrected. That is not your job. Your job is to facilitate the merger of the systems. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a brochure. Harborwick Employee Wellness Program. We think you might be burning out. David said softly. It happens. The stress of the compliance role is high. We want to offer you a 4-week paid wellness leave. I stared at the brochure. It was glossy and cheerful. And if I don't want to take leave? I asked. David sighed. He looked genuinely pained. Which was the most manipulative part of it all. Then we might have to look at a performance improvement plan, he said. And Kennedy, those usually only end one way. Take the leave. Rest. Reset. Stop worrying about things that are above your pay grade. It was an offer of safe passage. Go away for a month. Shut up. And you can keep your salary. I will think about it. I said, take the weekend. David said, let me know on Monday. I did not take the weekend to rest. I took the weekend to follow the money. If the money went into a Larkspur bulk account, how did they explain it? They had to show some benefit to the seniors. The debit cards, the allowance Walter mentioned. I logged into the vendor portal. My access was still active. Despite David's warning, I looked up the card issuer for the Warmline vouchers. It wasn't Larkspur directly. It was a fintech company called Morrowgate Payments. I ran a search on Morrowgate. It was a subsidiary of a holding company owned by the Renshaw Family Foundation. I pulled the fee schedule for the Morrowgate cards. It was buried in a 60-page terms of service document. Monthly maintenance fee, $15. Inactivity. Fee, $5. 00 per week. Transaction fee, $2.50. Balance inquiry fee, $1.75. I did the math. If they recovered $18,000 from Walter's unclaimed account, and they put it on a Morrowgate card, they didn't give him $18,000. They gave him a card with a limit of $20 a day. Meanwhile, the $18,000 sat in the main account, earning interest for Renshaw and Larkspur, and every month, the fees would eat away at the principal. They were not just stealing the money, they were charging the victims for the privilege of having their money stolen. It was an enclosed ecosystem of predation. Tuesday night was the city council meeting. I knew Warmline was on the agenda. I met Sasha there. We stood in the back of the auditorium, near the exit. The room was packed. The air smelled of floor wax and civic self-satisfaction. Mayor Gillingham stood at the podium. "Tonight, we honor a pillar of our community," the mayor said. "An organization that has revolutionized how we care for our most vulnerable citizens." Diane Halberd walked onto the stage. She looked radiant in a navy blue dress. The applause was thunderous. She accepted a glass plaque. She leaned into the microphone. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor," she said, her voice trembling with perfectly calibrated emotion. "This award belongs to the people we serve. It belongs to the partners who believe in dignity, Larkspur National, the Renshaw family, and the countless volunteers who give their time." I watched her face. It was a mask of pure, unadulterated benevolence. "We believe that no one should be forgotten," Diane said. "We believe that everyone deserves a name, a home, and a future." The crowd stood up. They cheered. They clapped until their hands hurt. I felt bile rise in my throat. I looked at Sasha. She was taking notes furiously, her face pale. "Dignity." I whispered, "It is a marketing word." Sasha whispered back, not looking up, "It is the most expensive word in the English language." I went to the park the next day to tell Walter what I had found about the fees. He wasn't there. I went to the bus station. I stayed in the shadows, scanning the benches. He wasn't there. I went to the church pantry on Friday. He wasn't there. Panic, cold and sharp, began to claw at my chest. Had they taken him? Had he been arrested? I spent 3 days driving around the city, checking every shelter, every soup kitchen. On the 4th day, my phone rang. It was a restricted number. "Walter?" I answered, my voice cracking. "Kennedy," he said. He sounded different, small, defeated. "Where are you?" I asked. "I'm at a motel," he said. "On Route 9. I drove there. It was a rundown place with peeling paint. Walter was sitting on the edge of the bed in room 104. He looked 10 years older than he had last week. There was a new coat on the chair. A nice one. Wool. Brand new. There was a box of groceries on the table. Premium brands. "They found me," Walter said. "Who?" "A man in a suit and a woman. They were very nice. Kennedy. They brought me the coat. They brought me food. What did they want?" "Walter?" I asked. Kneeling in front of him, "They offered me a settlement," he said. $5,000, cash, and a room in a senior living facility, a nice one, private bath. I felt a chill go through me. "And what do you have to do?" He picked up a piece of paper from the nightstand. "I have to sign this," he said. I took the paper. It was an affidavit. Walter Klein, hereby attest that due to recent medical confusion, I may have made false statements regarding my financial status. I further attest that I have never met or interacted with an individual named Kennedy Stewart, and any claims to the contrary are the result of disorientation. They want to erase me, I whispered. They said you are sick, Walter said softly. They said you are obsessed. They said you are using me to sue the bank because you hate your boss. They told me that if I keep talking to you, I will end up on the street again. But if I sign, I get a home. He looked at me, tears welling in his watery blue eyes. Kennedy, I am 72 years old. I am tired of being cold. I looked at the affidavit. I looked at the new coat. They were not beating him. They were buying him. They were using his desperation, the desperation they created, to silence him. It was psychological warfare. They were isolating the vulnerable, polishing the optics, and pressuring anyone who asked questions until they doubted their own sanity. Walter. I said, I didn't sign it yet. He said, I wanted to ask you. He looked at me with a terrible trust. Is it true? He asked. Are you sick? The question hit me like a physical blow. They had done their job well. They had planted the seed of doubt even in the man who saw the truth. I am not sick. Walter, I said firmly. And you are not confused. I put my hand on his. Do not sign this. Please, if I don't sign, Walter said. The offer goes away tomorrow, and the winter is coming. I took a deep breath. If you don't sign, I said, I promise you, we will get back more than $5,000. We will get it all back. It was a promise I wasn't sure I could keep, but I had to make it. Walter looked at the paper, then at me. He picked up the pen. I held my breath. He put the pen down. I am documented. He whispered, I am not confused. He pushed the paper away. But Kennedy, he said, you have to hurry. I can't stay here if I don't sign. I know. I said, I stood up. I am going to end this. Walter, I am going to end it soon. I left the motel room with a fire in my belly that terrified me. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't fight them in the shadows. I couldn't fight them with audits or compliance reports or quiet meetings with journalists. I had to drag them into the light. I had to make them say the lie in front of a microphone, in a room full of people, where they couldn't delete the log or shred the receipt. I drove back to the city, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I realized that I could not win by accusing them. Accusations are messy. They are emotional, in the court of public opinion, and certainly in the court of law. An accusation from a loan compliance manager against a pillar of the community looks like hysteria. It looks like a vendetta. If I wanted to destroy the Warmline initiative and the machine behind it, I did not need to scream the truth. I needed to make them whisper the lie. I needed to get them on the record. I needed a timestamp, a signature, or a voice confirming a falsehood that I could later prove. With mathematical certainty, was impossible. I stopped acting like a detective and started acting like an auditor. I called Sasha Morrow. We met in the back of the library, away from the windows, in a study carrel that smelled of old glue. We need the grant reports, I said. Sasha looked tired. Her eyes were rimmed with red. The ledger is getting nervous. Kennedy, my editor killed a piece on the zoning board yesterday because the developer is a Renshaw cousin. He is scrubbing everything. I do not need a story yet. I said, I need a public records request. You are a journalist. You can request the city's procurement audits for the Warmline grants. They are public funds. They have to show where the money went. Sasha hesitated, then opened her laptop. If I request them, the city clerk will notify Warmline. They will know we are looking. Good. I said, I want them to know. I want them to scramble to fix the numbers. That is when they make mistakes. We filed the request. By law, the city had to respond within 72 hours. When the documents came back, they were a mess of scanned PDFs, thousands of pages of invoices and ledger entries. We spent 2 nights in my storage locker, cross-referencing the city's payouts against Warmline's reported expenses. It was boring, grueling work. It was the kind of work I was born to do. I found it on page 412. Look at this, I said, pointing to a line item. Emergency transit stabilization, $1 million. $200,000. What does that mean? Sasha asked. It means nothing. I said, it is a bucket, a catch-all. Look at the vendor codes associated with it. I traced the line across the spreadsheet. The vendor code was 99-MISC. There were no invoices attached, just a quarterly lump sum paid out to various providers for urgent travel needs. This is where they are hiding the money from the unclaimed property scheme. I said, they are mixing the stolen assets with the legitimate grant money, washing it through this stabilization category, and then paying it out to their shell companies. But how do we prove the stabilization money isn't real? Sasha asked. We don't, I said. We make them tell us exactly how they audit it. I needed a fail-safe. If I was going to walk into the lion's den, I needed to know that my ghost would haunt them if I didn't walk out. I called Mara. She came to the storage unit, looking pale and terrified. The fluorescent light of the hallway hummed above us. This is the timeline, I said, handing her a 3-inch binder. It contains the notary list, the affidavit Walter refused to sign, the grant discrepancies, and the photos of the empty Cedar Ridge office. Mara took the binder like it was a bomb. What do I do with it? She whispered. You keep it. I said, you put it in a safe, not at your house, maybe at your parents' house in the county, somewhere nobody connects to you. And then? I handed her a sealed envelope. This is for Paige Corwin. I said, Paige was a defense attorney I had worked with on a contract dispute years ago. She was sharp, cynical, and hated the Renshaw family for personal reasons I had never asked about. If I am arrested, I said, if I go missing, if I have a sudden mental health crisis and get committed, if I am found dead in a car accident, you take this letter to Paige. It instructs her to release the binder to the state attorney general and the FBI. Kennedy, Mara said, tears welling in her eyes. This is too much. Just stop. Please. We can just walk away. I can't. I said, I saw Walter. Mara, they are trying to erase him. If I stop, he dies in a state home, thinking he was crazy. I hugged her. She felt fragile in my arms. But I knew she was stronger than she looked. She would do it. The trap was set. Now I needed the bait. I sent an email to Diane Halberd. I used my work email, signaling that this was a professional inquiry, not a personal crusade. Subject: Advisory Committee. Invitation/follow-up. Dear Diane, following our conversation at the Civic Hall, I have given your offer some thought. Harborwick is looking to expand its community partnerships, and I believe I could bring some of our compliance rigor to the Warmline Advisory Board. I would love to discuss this further. However, before I commit, I would need to review the current audit methodology for the voucher program to ensure it aligns with our internal standards. I hit send. I waited. It took 11 minutes. Dear Kennedy, we would be thrilled. Let us meet this Thursday at our headquarters in Glenford Plaza. I can walk you through everything personally. She agreed too quickly. A normal executive would have pushed me to a deputy or scheduled a phone call. Diane wanted me in the room. She wanted to close the loop. She thought I was coming to negotiate my surrender. She thought I was looking for a way to be bought. Glenford Plaza was a fortress of glass and limestone on the north side of the city. It was the kind of building designed to make you feel small. The lobby had 30-foot ceilings and a security desk that looked like the bridge of a starship. I arrived at 9:50 for a 10 o'clock meeting. I checked in. The guard scanned my ID and printed a badge. Visitor, Kennedy Stewart. Escort required. A young man in a sharp gray suit appeared from the elevator bank. He had the dead-eyed smile of a corporate fixer. Ms. Stewart, he said, I am Jason. I will be taking you up. We rode the elevator in silence to the 44th floor. The doors opened onto a reception area that smelled of white lilies and money. Diane is just finishing a call, Jason said. If you could wait in the conference room? He led me down a hallway lined with modern art, splashes of red and black that looked violent against the white walls. He opened a heavy oak door. The conference room was soundproof. I could tell by the way the air pressure changed when I stepped inside. The view was spectacular. Looking out over the entire city of Briarhaven, I could see the Gray Line depot from here. a tiny gray smudge in the distance. Jason stood by the door. "Ms. Stewart," he said pleasantly, "we have a strict privacy policy in the executive wing. I will need to check your phone." He held out a plastic bin. I smiled at him. I kept my hand on my bag. "I am afraid I can't do that." "Jason," I said, "my phone contains confidential Harborwick patient data. My company policy forbids me from surrendering it to a third party." Jason's smile thinned. It did not disappear, but it lost all warmth. "It is just for the duration of the meeting," he said. "We will keep it right here." "I can't," I said. "I am sure Diane understands compliance protocols." He stared at me for 3 seconds. It was a power struggle. Stripped of all pretense, he was trying to disarm me. I was refusing to be disarmed. "Fine," he said tightly. "Please turn it off and keep it in your bag." I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and powered it down in front of him. "Satisfied?" I asked. He nodded once and left the room. I waited until the door clicked shut. I did not turn my phone back on. That would be amateur. They probably had a signal detector in the room. Instead, I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer. I had taped a digital dictaphone, an old model. No Bluetooth, no Wi-Fi. To the lining of my jacket. I pressed the record button through the fabric. The door opened. Diane Halberd swept in. She was wearing a crimson dress that looked like armor. She did not look like a charity director. She looked like a shark in silk. "Kennedy," she said, beaming, "so glad you decided to come in." She sat at the head of the table. She did not offer me water. "I'm glad to be here," I said. Diane folded her hands on the polished mahogany table. "Let us be frank. Kennedy," she said. Her voice dropped to a level of intimacy that made my skin crawl. "You are a smart woman. You are talented. You have an eye for detail that is frankly wasted in a back office at Harborwick." I stayed silent. I let her talk. "We have been talking to the leadership at Larkspur," she continued, "and at the Renshaw Foundation. We think you have a future, a big one." "What kind of future?" I asked. "There is a seat opening on the Regional Oversight Board." Diane said, "It comes with a stipend, $20,000 a year. And, of course, Harborwick is looking for a new director of strategic compliance. A very senior role. We could make a call. We could ensure you are the top candidate. It was the carrot. It was the bribe. Stop digging. And we will make you rich." "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity." I said. "It is," Diane said, "but it requires focus. It requires team players who understand that sometimes the big picture is more important than the clerical errors." "Clerical errors," I repeated. Diane sighed. She looked at me with a disappointed kindness. "You have been asking a lot of questions about the transit vouchers. Kennedy, about the unclaimed property filings. We know you have been talking to unreliable sources. I assume you mean Walter Klein." I said, "Mr. Klein is a troubled man," Diane said smoothly. "We have been trying to help him for years, but he is confused. He tells stories. We wouldn't want a promising career like yours to be derailed because you listen to the ramblings of a man with dementia." I felt the anger rising in my throat. Hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. I needed the tape. "I understand." I said, "and I want to be part of the solution. That is why I asked about the audit methodology." Diane waved a hand. "The methodology is standard. We use a third-party administrator. Cedar Ridge." I leaned forward. "And Cedar Ridge verifies the identity of every claimant?" I asked. "Of course. And the notaries?" I asked. "Specifically, the notary who handles the property releases, Elias Thorne. Is he a Cedar Ridge employee?" Diane's expression flickered. Just for a microsecond, a twitch at the corner of her eye. She recognized the name. "Elias is a contractor," she said, "a very trusted one. So you can confirm." I said, speaking clearly for the microphone in my pocket, that Elias Thorne personally witnesses the signatures of the seniors? That he witnessed Walter Klein sign his release? Diane stared at me. She realized, suddenly, that this was not a negotiation. It was an interrogation. Her smile vanished. The room went cold. "We have rigorous controls." "Kennedy," she said, her voice hard. We verify everything. If Mr. Klein says otherwise, he is lying. So the $18,000 that was transferred from the state to the Larkspur holding account, that was authorized by him? Diane stood up. I think we are done here, she said. She reached into a folder on the table and slid a document toward me. This is a non-disclosure agreement, she said. It covers our confidential donor strategies. If you want the board seat, if you want the promotion, you will sign this, and you will stop harassing our clients. I looked at the document. It was 5 pages of legal dense fog. And if I don't sign? I asked. Diane looked out the window. At the city her partners owned. Then I cannot protect you from the consequences of your obsession, she said. I stood up. I picked up my bag. I don't need your protection. Diane, I said. I walked to the door. Kennedy, she called after me. I stopped, my hand on the handle. Don't go alone, she said. It was the same thing Walter had said, but when Walter said it, it was a warning. When Diane said it, it was a threat. I walked out of the office suite, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would bruise my ribs. I had the recording. I had her on tape confirming that Elias Thorne was a trusted contractor who verified the signatures. I knew Elias Thorne did not exist. I knew he was a rubber stamp in an empty room. She had just lied about a ghost. I rode the elevator down. I needed to get to Sasha. I needed to get to Mara. I pushed through the revolving doors of Glenford Plaza, stepping out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the plaza. Ms. Kennedy Stewart? A man stepped in front of me. He was short, balding, wearing a cheap windbreaker. He held a thick envelope. Yes, I said. Stepping back. You are served, he said. He thrust the envelope into my hands. What is this? I asked. Civil suit, he said. Already walking away. Have a nice day. I stood on the sidewalk. People streaming past me. I tore open the envelope. Superior Court of Briarhaven. Plaintiff. The Briarhaven Warm Line Initiative. Larkspur National Bank. Defendant. Kennedy Stewart. Nature of action. Civil harassment. Defamation of character. Tortious interference with business relations. I scanned the document. It was brutal. It accused me of stalking vulnerable seniors. It accused me of impersonating a government official. It accused me of stealing proprietary data from Harborwick to conduct a personal vendetta. They were suing me for $5 million in damages, and there was a temporary restraining order attached. The defendant is hereby ordered to stay 500 yards away from all Warmline facilities, including the Gray Line Transit Depot. I felt a wave of dizziness. They had this ready. They had drafted it days ago. They knew I wouldn't sign the NDA. They let me walk into the meeting just to confirm that I was a threat, and then they dropped the hammer. This was exactly what Walter had predicted. The machine turns. I wasn't an investigator anymore. I was a defendant. My phone buzzed as I walked to my car. It was Sasha. Kennedy. She said. Her voice was shaking. Sasha, I have the recording. I said, I have her lying about the notary. We can run it. We can't. Sasha said, What? My editor. Sasha said, Frank, he called me into his office 10 minutes ago. He killed the story. Why? I demanded. We have the data. Kennedy. Someone hacked the Ledger's servers last night. Sasha said, They accessed the HR files. They found emails, personal emails that Frank sent years ago, things that would ruin his marriage. Blackmail. I whispered. He was told that if he runs anything about Warmline, the emails get leaked. Sasha said, He is terrified. He scrubbed the server. He deleted my draft. He deleted the grant reports. I leaned against my car. The metal hot against my palms. They killed the story. I said, I am sorry. Kennedy, Sasha said, and I could hear she was crying. I can't lose my job. I can't lose my reputation. I have to back off. She hung up. I stood there in the parking garage. The silence was heavy. I was alone. Mara had the binder, but she was just a civilian. Sasha was neutralized. Walter was being pressured to sign his life away, and I was being sued for $5 million. I got into my car. I locked the doors. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. It was the clarity of the cornered animal. They had stripped away everything. My job was gone. David would fire me the moment the lawsuit hit his desk. My reputation was gone. The lawsuit would be public record. My allies were gone. But they had made one mistake. By suing me, by blackmailing the paper, by threatening Walter. They had confirmed everything. If I was wrong, they would have ignored me. You don't sue a crazy person for $5 million. You ignore them. You only use this much force when you are terrified. I drove home. I didn't turn on the radio. I walked up the stairs to my apartment. I expected the lock to be broken. I expected the place to be tossed. But the door was locked. I opened it. The apartment was still. There was a small white envelope on the floor, just inside the door. It had been slid through the gap. No return address, no stamp, hand-delivered. I picked it up. I walked to the kitchen island. I opened it. There was no letter, just a single photograph. Printed on high-quality glossy paper. It was a black-and-white image, grainy but unmistakable. It was me. Standing at the counter of the Gray Line Transit Depot, my hand was extended, holding my debit card. Walter stood next to me. His head bowed. The timestamp in the corner read, 1947-03. It was the moment of the transaction, the moment I paid the $22. I stared at the photo. The angle was high, from a ceiling camera, but the zoom was impossible. It was focused perfectly on my face, and then I saw it. I dropped the burning photo into the sink and watched it turn to dust. It cost me everything. I said to the empty room. I turned on the faucet and washed the ash away. But I haven't sent the bill yet. The only way to kill a ghost is to turn on all the lights. They had sued me. They had threatened my employment. They had blackmailed a newspaper. They had tried to bribe a 72-year-old man into signing away his sanity. They had operated in the shadows of shell companies and empty offices, relying on the fact that no one looks closely at charity. So I decided to take them to the brightest room in Briarhaven, the Warm Line Initiative. Annual Gala was the crown jewel of the city's social calendar. It was held at the Briarhaven Atrium Hotel, a venue of glass and gold leaf where a single plate of rubbery chicken cost $500. The mayor would be there. The city council would be there. The board of Larkspur National Bank would be there. It was the perfect place for a murder, or at least, the murder of a reputation. I spent the morning in the conference room of Paige Corwin's law office. Paige was a woman made of sharp angles and sharper statutes. She reviewed my binder with the intensity of a bomb disposal technician. "This is dangerous." "Kennedy," Paige said, tapping the stack of certified filings I had pulled from the storage locker. "The restraining order says you have to stay 500 yards away. If you step onto that property, they can arrest you." "Let them," I said. "If they arrest me in front of the mayor while I'm holding evidence of grand larceny, the arrest becomes the story." Paige looked at me, then at the binder. "You are not going to win the lawsuit tonight," she said. "I know." I said, "I'm not trying to win a lawsuit. I am trying to force a deposition. If I make the accusation in public, with witnesses, they have to respond. They cannot hide behind a motion to dismiss." I looked over at the corner of the room. Walter sat in a leather chair that swallowed his small frame. He was wearing his new coat, the one they had bought him to buy his silence. "Walter," I said, "you do not have to do this." He looked up. His hands were resting on his knees. They were still shaking, but his eyes were steady. "They took my name, Kennedy," he said softly. "They signed it to a lie. I want it back. I had one last loose end to tie at Harborwick. I knew David Sowerby would fire me on Monday. The lawsuit made me a liability. But until my badge was deactivated, I was still the project lead for the Larkspur integration. I logged into the system from my laptop in Paige's office. I initiated a Level 1 vendor audit request. It was a nuclear option in the compliance world. It froze the vendor's approval status and automatically generated a notification to the federal banking regulators if the vendor was a financial institution. I typed in the justification. Discrepancy in beneficiary identity verification. Potential violation of Know Your Customer protocols. Reference: Morrow Gate Payments. I hit enter. The system flashed red. Warning: this action will trigger an external review. I confirmed it. By the time I closed my laptop, the email would be in the inbox of the comptroller of the currency. Larkspur could not delete it. They could not hide it. They would have to explain why their charity partner was issuing debit cards to people who did not exist. I had lit the fuse. Now I had to walk into the fire. The Briarhaven Atrium Hotel was glowing. Valets were parking Porsches and Mercedes 3 deep. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the distinct, crisp scent of money being spent to prove it existed. I wore a black dress. Simple, severe. I did not look like a disruptor. I looked like one of them. I walked in through the main doors. My heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs that felt fast enough to break bone. I expected security to stop me. I expected Jason, the corporate fixer, to step out of the shadows. But no one stopped me. I realized then that Diane Halberd's arrogance was my security clearance. She had served me with the lawsuit to scare me, but she did not actually believe I would show up. In her world, people like me, mid-level managers with mortgages, did not crash galas. We cried at home and called our lawyers. I walked into the ballroom. It was a sea of tuxedos and gowns. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen explosions. I saw Paige enter through the side door. She was not with me. She was standing near the bar, looking casual. But I saw the hotel's event manager standing next to her. Paige had already briefed him on the potential for a disturbance involving a protected whistleblower. She was building my shield. Walter was there too. He was sitting at a table near the back, looking small and terrified. But he was there. I moved to the edge of the room, standing in the shadow of a massive floral arrangement. The lights dimmed. Diane Halberd took the stage. She looked magnificent. She was the queen of this city, bathed in a spotlight that made her diamonds sparkle like stars. "Welcome, friends, allies, and partners," she said. Her voice was warm honey. "Tonight, we celebrate connection. We celebrate the simple, powerful act of helping a neighbor home." The crowd applauded. I saw the mayor clapping. I saw Gavin Rhodes, the vice president of Larkspur National, nodding approvingly from the front table. Diane spoke for 10 minutes. She spoke of dignity. She spoke of hope. She showed a video montage of stock footage actors smiling in front of sunsets. And then, she did something I did not expect. She scanned the room. Her eyes landed on the back corner. They landed on me. She did not look angry. She smiled. A beatific, terrifying smile. She had decided to play the ultimate power card. She was going to co-opt me. She was going to invite me into the fold publicly, making it impossible for me to attack her without looking like a monster. "We have many heroes in this room," Diane said, "but I want to recognize someone special. A young woman from our corporate sector who has shown such passion for our mission that she has challenged us to be even better." The room went quiet. "Kennedy Stewart," Diane called out. "Where are you?" The spotlight swung. It blinded me. "Come up here." "Kennedy," Diane said, gesturing with a welcoming hand. "Join us." It was a trap. If I refused, I looked sullen and ungrateful. If I went up, she would hug me, hand me a bouquet, and silence me with applause. I did not refuse. I walked toward the stage. The clapping was polite, confused. They did not know who I was. I walked up the stairs. Diane was waiting, her arms open for a hug. I did not hug her. I walked past her outstretched arms and stepped directly to the podium. Diane's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered. She stepped in close, trying to steer me away from the microphone. "Say a few words about partnership," she hissed in my ear, her voice a razor blade wrapped in velvet. I gripped the sides of the podium. My hands were steady. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the mayor. I saw the bankers. I saw the money. "Thank you." "Diane," I said. My voice boomed through the speakers, clear and loud. I reached into my clutch. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. "I am honored to be here." I said. But before we celebrate, I have one question for the Warm Line Initiative. The room went deadly silent. Diane took a step toward me, her hand reaching for the microphone. Kennedy, she warned, her voice low. I spoke over her. Can Warmline confirm? Tonight, the identity of the notary listed on these resolved unclaimed property releases? I held up the paper. It was the list. Diane froze. The question hung in the air. Simple and devastating. It was not an accusation of theft. It was a question of process. Diane laughed, a high, brittle sound. Oh, Kennedy, she said into her own lapel mic. This is hardly the time for administrative details. We can discuss audit protocols at the office. I did not move. I turned to the table where the city clerk was sitting. I have here a sealed envelope, I said, pulling it from my bag. It contains a sworn affidavit regarding the non-existence of Elias V. Thorne, the notary who has authorized over $4 million in property transfers to this organization. I walked to the edge of the stage and held the envelope out. Mr. Clerk, I said, I am formally serving you with evidence of public fraud. The city clerk, a man named Henderson who looked like he wanted to vanish into the floor, hesitated, but the spotlight was on him. The cameras were rolling. He stood up and took the envelope. I pulled out a second envelope, and this one, I said, is for the State Treasury Auditor. It contains the routing numbers for the bulk settlement account at Larkspur National, where the funds were deposited. Diane moved. She signaled to the side of the stage. Security, she snapped, dropping the pretense. Get her off the stage. Two large men in dark suits started up the stairs. But before they could reach me, Gavin Rhodes stood up from the front table. He was smooth. He was the kind of man who could spin a train wreck into a logistics victory. He walked to the stage, waving the security guards back. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice booming, please, Ms. Stewart is obviously under a great deal of stress. We are currently in litigation regarding her harassment of our staff. He looked at me with a pitying smile. Kennedy, he said, you are embarrassing yourself. These claims have been resolved. The seniors in question signed the releases. We have the documents. He looked at the crowd. We help people who cannot manage their own affairs. Gavin said, sometimes, sadly, those people become confused about what they have signed. It was the lie, the defense. They are confused. I looked at the back of the room. Walter, I said into the microphone, are you confused? The crowd turned. Walter Klein stood up. He looked small in the vast ballroom, but he did not look down. He looked straight at Gavin Rhodes. He did not have a microphone, but the room was so quiet that his voice carried like a bell. My name is Walter Klein, he said. He held up his shaking hands. I have not signed a document in 3 years because my hands shake too much to hold a pen, he said. He paused. I never signed that release, he said, and I'm not confused. I am just broke. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a narrative shattering. Gavin Rhodes stopped smiling. Diane Halberd looked at Walter with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. She motioned to the security guards again. Remove him, she shouted. He is a trespasser. The guards turned toward Walter, but they didn't get far. Paige Corwin stepped in front of Walter. She was holding her phone up. Recording. I am his attorney, she announced. If you touch him, you are assaulting a witness in an active federal investigation. Next to her, the hotel event manager stepped forward. He put a hand on the security guard's chest. Not in my hotel, he said. We do not drag guests out. The optics flipped instantly. It was no longer a gala. It was a standoff. On one side, the wealthy, the powerful, the polished. On the other, an old man in a cheap coat, a lawyer, and a woman in a black dress standing at a podium she wasn't supposed to have. Diane tried to salvage it. This is a stunt, she yelled, her composure fracturing. This is an orchestrated attack by a disgruntled employee. And then the twist landed. The doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. It wasn't the police. It was Sasha Morrow. She wasn't holding a notepad. She was holding her phone high in the air, the screen glowing. She wasn't alone. Behind her walked 3 other people, 2 women and a man, all elderly, all dressed in their Sunday best. "I am live!" Sasha shouted. Her voice cracked, but it was loud. "I am streaming to 20,000 people right now." She pointed the phone at the stage. "These are the other claimants," Sasha yelled. "Beatrice O'Connell, David Lewis, Arthur Miller." She pointed to the seniors behind her. "They are all listed as resolved," Sasha said, "and none of them have seen a dime." The room erupted. Waiters stopped serving. Donors began to check their phones. The murmur of conversation turned into a roar of panic. Diane Halberd looked at Gavin Rhodes. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not the fear of losing a donor, but the primal fear of the cage. Gavin turned his back on her. He pulled out his phone and began walking away, distancing himself from the woman he had just been applauding. I stood at the podium. I looked at Diane. "I have the recording." "Diane," I said into the microphone, "the one where you confirmed Elias Thorne is a trusted contractor." I leaned in close. "The police are on their way." I said, "Don't go alone." The next hour was a blur of flashing lights and shouting voices. The police did arrive, but they didn't arrest me. They couldn't, not with Sasha live streaming and the city clerk holding a packet of evidence. They secured the room. They took statements. I watched from the side of the stage as Diane Halberd was escorted out through the kitchen doors by her own security team. Not in handcuffs yet, but in a protective cordon that looked a lot like custody. Gavin Rhodes had vanished. I walked down the stairs. Walter was sitting on a chair, surrounded by the other seniors Sasha had found. They were talking. They were comparing notes. For the first time, they weren't isolated victims. They were a class action. I walked over to them. Walter looked up. He smiled. It was the first real smile I had seen on his face. "You did it," he said. "We did it." I said, "Paige Corwin was on the phone with the FBI field office. She gave me a thumbs up. They are opening a file," she mouthed. I looked around the ballroom. The party was over. The champagne was warm. The illusion of benevolence had been stripped away, leaving only the ugly machinery of greed exposed. I saw Sasha near the door. She was still streaming, answering questions from the chat. She looked exhausted and exhilaratingly alive. She had defied her editor, defied the blackmail, and broken the story of the decade. I walked toward the exit. I didn't want to talk to the press. I didn't want to talk to the mayor. I stepped out into the cool night air of Briarhaven. My phone buzzed. It was an email notification from Harborwick HR. Subject: Notice of immediate termination. I deleted it without reading it. I walked to my car. I had lost my job. I had likely lost my career in compliance. I was facing a lawsuit that would take years to untangle. Even if I was right, my savings were gone. My reputation in the corporate world was ash. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the hotel. I thought about the $22 I had spent at the bus station. It was the most expensive ticket I had ever bought. But as I watched the blue lights of the police cruisers reflect off the glass facade of the hotel, I realized something. I hadn't just paid for a ticket. I had paid for the truth, and for the first time in a long time, the ledger was balanced. I started the car and drove away, leaving the lights burning bright behind me. Thank you for listening to Kennedy's story. It is a terrifying thought that the systems meant to help us can be weaponized against the most vulnerable, and that a single act of kindness can pull a thread that unravels an entire city. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. I am always amazed to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this journey into the shadows of Briarhaven, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. There are many more truths waiting to be uncovered. What would you have done if you were Kennedy? Would you have walked away? Or would you have lit the match? Let me know your thoughts in English in the comments. Stay safe and watch who is watching you.